So I think you get the general idea with that. There's events going on in proximity to the beacons, but I think they did a particularly nice job with that, so it's a good presentation. Just 2 seconds. Okay, go back to that. So in museums, I think what we're finding is it's changing the customer journey from what you might recognize as the old audio guide tour. Now it's a free-form thing on a tablet. It's interesting for museums because they're starting to understand their customers better and the behavior around the objects and the galleries that people are walking around. They're also able to message people if they get crowd congestion. So we're able to understand how many people are in any display area at one time, and therefore divert people with dynamic messaging on navigation. So. Okay. The next use case is around events like this, so exhibitions and conferences. And this, there's a whole bunch of things that can be done with this technology here. So ticketing, so I know you all registered for this show because you're here. When you came, you had to come and pick your ticket up at a desk. I don't know if you're aware, but Passbook on an iPhone is beacon enabled. There's no SDK required on that. It exists in the iPhone. If you actually download a ticket into Passbook on an iPhone, as soon as you approach a beacon, it will actually broadcast that ticket, and I'll show you that shortly. But it helps to speed up registration and entry, obviously. So then you can go into welcome messages, navigation and wayfinding around the exhibition, and different things. I mean, you can read the things obviously there. Application, again, cinemas and theatres. This is quite an interesting one. So this is usually the first case with any beacon deployment is a hello. So that's where you typically start. So that would be a welcome message. In this case, welcome to the cinema. As you go in, it's always sensible to have an opt-in screen before you start an engagement as well. But once you go through that, this is the ticketing application I talked about with Passbook. So if those of you who've used it, Passbook delivers it when you register for an event and download a ticket, it lives in your phone. If you've been to the airport and used that, normally the ticket appears on your phone, but it appears on your phone on a time slice. So if you're late for your flight or that you've changed your plans, that ticket's not going to appear on your phone. The way it works with a beacon is the beacon triggers the ticket on your phone to appear when you're in proximity to the beacon. So that's the difference in how that technology works with beacons. So once you've got the notification, you just simply swipe it and it will open up the ticket, and then obviously you can redeem it. With promotions, what we're doing with a few customers is once we're assuming here there's an app involved. The customer is in a cinema, they buy the food concession, and in this case they've chosen to serve a coupon to them, and that's a coupon that is served through the content management engine from our system. This one's quite an interesting one. We take the use of technology a little further by building apps onto beacons. So the need for having a native app on the phone starts to go away a little bit here in this use case. We have a beacon, and some other people have beacons that are capable of storing a native app. And basically, what happens there when you're in proximity, in this case, in a cinema where they're talking about the Spider-Man movie upcoming, it will play a video straight there and then. So it's just a different level of engagement that people are starting to play with. So, and then options around gamification. So you may have been in the movie theatre where I know Sony have tried a few things, and I'm not sure how successful it is. The beacon starts to make that engagement richer. Shazam is starting to use this technology now to, when you're listening on your phone, obviously that's part of their core application, but what they're looking to do is start to have those engagements externally from theatres, and the engagement works that if you're listening to some music in proximity to a beacon, it can start to serve other content to you, which is not related, or is related to the song you're listening to, but actually it's coming from a third party. So, and then at the end of it, obviously exit, thank you for coming, however you wanted to deal with that. So some of the lessons learned that we've gone through, and I'm just picking out three of these. There's lots, but these would be the core three that I'd advise you about. Is know your environment and survey it. Beacon technology is great technology, but it's not foolproof. So there are some environments that are more challenging than others. It doesn't like a lot of metal for obvious reasons. We talk about where to locate your beacons. Place them as high as possible, because if you're broadcasting a wireless signal, broadcasting through a lot of bodies, we're mostly made up of water, that's not a good thing as well. So broadcasting high and overcasting or overshadowing an event is better. And then the frequency range and crossover. If you've got lots of beacons deployed, understand where you exit one and where you start in another. So in this case, for instance, if there were 5 beacons along from each of these exhibition stands, how do you know where one starts and another one ends? So it's kind of make sure that you've got the frequencies and proximities scales all set up, and that you don't have that overlap, because it causes conflict on how the apps interact. Security I touched upon earlier, so beacons are an open standard, and now there are beacons technology that's starting to rotate that frequency, and I would highly recommend that that's the route that you go down for deployment. And then I talked about this as well. Obviously, the opportunity to talk to your customers is a highly valuable opportunity, and therefore, if you start to engage in just sending them a quick and easy discount voucher, I think that gets old very quickly, and the technology gets switched off on the phone. So the encouragement here is really work with your customers and understand what value you can deliver to them. So it would be remiss of me now to not talk a little bit about our beacons after all that. So we have some beacons that are different to the coin cell beacons I started with. We have beacons that work with UV cell and also mains or battery power. And our beacons are also iOS and Android. It's interesting, with a lot of beacon technology, you either commit to it being, the beacon device commits to being an Android device or an iOS device. With our beacons, they interleaf, so we can have one beacon talking to 2 different devices, so it does different things. We have, so the first beacons we talk about, the BLE beacon, we call that a presence beacon, because all that's doing is sending an advertising packet to say, I am here. We then have a beacon that's more intelligent, that's a gateway beacon. It's a Wi-Fi beacon that allows 2-way communication. So the first thing to note here, with Wi-Fi and BLE, if your customer has got Bluetooth switched on, with this type of beacon, you can still have the engagement. So one of the issues that we know is kind of, well, do my customers walk around with Bluetooth on their phone? This issue goes away, because we know here in the UK particularly, our default state is Wi-Fi on, Bluetooth off. So that allows for a lot wider engagement. This beacon also is a little smarter than a BLE beacon in the fact that it allows for 2-way communication. So what we find is that we can trigger an event through the normal route, but if your customer has an app and they're starting to want to ingest data from that app, with this beacon we can do that and then send that data to wherever you like. So it starts to get a little smarter again. And then the third beacon that then I'll talk a little bit about the range extends with Wi-Fi, and it goes from 50 meters to 150 meters. Actually, that's incorrect, but so with Wi-Fi, the engagement starts a lot further out than with BLE. So then the next thing that we have is our third product, which is, we call this our smart beacon. And this does a couple of things. So I touched upon it earlier, but it's a captive portal, which means an app can live on the beacon rather than being a native app on the phone. And that means that when your customer comes into proximity, they would connect to this beacon as though it was a hotspot, and then an engagement would automatically play. It's not like connected to wireless password and username. It's an automatic deployment from the hotspot. So that gets rid of another of the problems of, well, does my customer have an app or not? And then finally, another thing that this beacon does that's quite smart is it starts to count traffic. So every smartphone in this room right now is broadcasting a MAC address. It's not related to Apple. It's called a Media Asset Controller, and that's a piece of data that your phone broadcasts by default. With this beacon, we can see those MAC addresses. It's not having an interaction with you, but we can count you as though we're click counting you. So now we understand your movement around this hall. We understand what your dwell time has been, and an example here could be We have a customer who uses this technology where they're in a shopping centre, they have beacons in their shop window, and if they wanted to know, first of all, how many people come to the shopping centre every day. So now they have that information. The assumption is 70% of people are carrying a smartphone, so they can extrapolate from there. So now they know how many people are coming to the shopping centre. The next thing they want to know is how many people are coming by their store, so they're able to track that. And looking at their point of sale in the windows, how many people are actually stopped by what they're displaying in the window. Then we can measure the dwell time on how long people waited for or stood in that area and looked at what was in the window. Now the next part of it is really interesting, because what happens next? Did that force them to come in the shop, or did that force them then to leave? And at that point, then you start to deploy beacons in store through a more classic route, and the engagement becomes a lot richer, because you know that person has been looking at this dress in a window for 2 minutes, and now they've come in the store. So it starts to get a lot smarter. So that, and then we can take that MAC address data and present it back in heat maps of venues, etc. So that's just something that we do as an aside. So it's happening, it's coming fast, and I think I'm going to finish now for some questions. But you know, I think my analogy here, it's a technology that's really, really hurtling along. But if you're in control, you're not fast enough. So I'd encourage you to get involved as soon as possible. All right. Thank you. Okay. Do you have questions?
If anyone has any questions, I'll pass the mic around. Yeah?
Well, thank you for the presentation. I have a quick question. Could you just please explain again, how does the smart beacon work? Because you don't need to have an app on your phone, right? It just pops something.
With that one specifically, it's something that looks like this. We call it a captive portal. This does a couple of things. It has its own Linux processor inside. It also is doing the BLE and Wi-Fi transmission, but it has, the fourth part of this is it has SD storage. So we have 128 gigabytes of local storage. The app will live on here. When you come into proximity with this, the requirement here is that typically you'd have some indicator that there is a wireless network that you want your customer to connect to. Once they connect to that wireless network, it plays an app through the phone's browser. Simple as that.
So my question would be, does a user have to have a Wi-Fi signal on or a Bluetooth signal on, or just have to connect to your hotspot? Is that how you transferred it?
So this device specifically will connect to is a Wi-Fi hotspot, a pseudo Wi-Fi hotspot, but the engagement is local. So if the web app is stored on here, the engagement goes on locally. So you're not relying on the phone to go off to the internet, because if you've got a poor connection, that could always be problematic. So it's being served locally through this Wi-Fi signal from this beacon. Okay.
Thank you. What if customers don't want to be engaged with the beacon technology? Do they have to turn off their wireless networks off on their phones?
I think, as I mentioned, it's important that with your customers you treat them carefully. So always have an opt-in, opt-out option. And that's at the beginning of any engagement. And if they've said no, they've said no. And then it's never until they come back and say, yes, please.
Thank you. The benefits to a business seem significant in terms of targeting, data capture, et cetera, Do you think beacon technology lends itself to better customer service experience for the customer, for the consumer?
Sorry. Yes, the answer is yes. I think understanding your customers better always can help in developing better interaction with your customer. So what we're providing is higher levels of information about how they behave when they're in your venue or store, what they are doing online and how that connects to what they do in store. So you start to understand behaviors a lot better, and therefore as a sensible brand owner you should be then adapting and behaving accordingly. So yes, shaking your head there.
Hi. you mentioned use of the MAC address as a way of not so much identifying the user, although I suppose perhaps that's possible, but tracking their journey from one place to the next. Did I hear correctly that Apple are now or are about to start masking the MAC address so that you can't track from day to day continuously?
Okay. Yes, you are correct that Apple in iOS 8 have said they were going to rotate the MAC address. The fact of the matter is that the phone, if it's live, it cannot do that function. If Wi-Fi is enabled, it cannot do that function. So if there's an app on board the phone that connects to a beacon, it cannot do that function. So that rotating of the MAC address only happens when the phone's asleep. So I really don't understand the relevance of it, to be honest. And we have tested it extensively, so it's not an issue. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time. We're just located around the corner if anybody would like to come and have a conversation. Thank you.